Today, we are covering what we call invoice line items, a feature that gives you item level control when building invoices. So, if you've ever needed to bill for a change order or custom work where standard amounts don't cut it, this one's for you. Let's jump in. Standard invoice groups have always worked great for quote-based billing. You have a group name, an amount, and a description. It's simple, it's effective. But some situations need more than that. A change order that wasn't on the original quote, materials with a different margin than the rest of the job, a customer who wants a fully itemized breakdown of what they're being charged for. That is what line item groups are for. So instead of a single dollar amount, you add individual line items from your price list, each with its own quantity, cost, margin, and price. The subtotal calculates automatically, and you can organize everything within section headers, just like a quote, really. So let's go to enable the feature. I'm going to go, let me share my screen. So we're going to go over to our hamburger menu, top left, go down to company settings, and then we're going to go into the left menu and scroll to new features. Doo-doo. And invoice line items. This is already enabled. So we'll just leave that there, but you would enable it. Once that's done on your end, you'll see the line item groups option anytime you're editing an invoice, which we'll cover shortly. Before you roll this out to your team, I'd also recommend reviewing your permission profiles under billing access. That controls who can see or edit the cost, margin, price fields. And I'll cover that in more detail later in the session, but just something to be aware of. Setting default invoice margins in your price list. Emily, before building your first line item invoice, take a few minutes to set default margins in your price list. So it'll save you time on all of the invoices that you create going forward. We're going to go through how to do that too. Let's go back to our company settings, but we're going to go to price list instead. There we go. Okay. Find the item you want to configure. And then in this case, I'll use aluminum step flashing and I'll search for it here. It's right here. This is my item. Then I'm going to edit. All right. So click the default invoice margin icon, which is loaded term. We're going to click all of these little things. You can see that's to edit the item itself, the color, variations, margin. So this was the little dollar sign icon, by the way. So I'm going to make this invoice margin default to 35%. So that makes the invoice price $90.77. If you see that. So went from 0 at $59 to making this 35%, which made it $90. And it auto-saved that for me. Two things to keep in mind. Changing a default margin does not affect existing line items already on invoices and only new ones. So only new ones going forward. And then defaults are a starting point. You can always override them on individual invoices. So if that's not what you want to charge, you can always change it later. So I guess one thing to cover is probably what is the difference between the standard groups and the line item groups. The terminology does sound very similar, but these two types of invoice groups in ProLine, standard groups have an editable name, editable total, and an editable description. Then they sync with signed quotes and work great for deposit, progress, and balance invoices. Line item groups have an editable name and description, but the total is calculated, not manually entered. So you add an individual item, you set the quantity and margin, and then the subtotal updates automatically. The question is, when do you need the item level control like this? If you're billing off of a signed quote, I think stay with standard invoices. You can also do a mix of both in the same invoice. So a standard group for the original contract amount and then a line item group for additional charges. That is probably one of the most common use cases. And that's a clean way to handle change orders alongside the original billing. So let me show you what this looks like. I will choose a project for which I already have a signed quote on my boards page. So I have my approved quotes here. Um, 123 Main Street. Here we go. Let's do this one. Um, all right. So click on new invoice and let's see, what kind of invoice do we want? Let's do balance. Yes, do balance. And then we're going to pull from this roof replacement quote that's in here, which obviously we did not cover, but it's there. Mhm. All right, we've got our standard group that's already here. This was on the quote that was already signed originally that's on this project. I'm going to add a group and I want to choose line items for this example. And then I can still do a group name and add line items beneath it. And I can leave a description of this new group if I want to. I could call this change order or something like that. Okay. Let's add a line item and I'm going to choose the aluminum step flashing that we just updated because we already put the margin in here. Okay. And then we're going to put a quantity in, let's say 15 of those. Okay. So what you see here is we have the quantity in bundles for aluminum step flashing, the margin, the price we're charging the customer, and what this subtotal is, and then how it adds to the total of what this invoice was, which was the original signed quote. I'm going to just save and close this so we can take a look at what this looks like on the invoice. All right, so you see here how this looks for the customer. Let me go ahead and close this. And I can edit this again. I can click here and switch back to standard. So maybe I don't want to do this type of line item invoicing. So I'm going to go switch back to standard and click the blue switch button. All right. And I just have this line item group here. So as you saw, the confirmation dialog is there for a reason. When switching from line items to standard, the calculated total is preserved as the new editable amount. So I can go in here and just edit this amount. I'm not seeing any other information, right? The quantity or the price or the margin or the cost. I'm just going to edit the amount and add it in there too. The sync with the signed quote is restored if it existed before. And then when switching from standard back to line items, the total becomes calculated but not editable. So this total is editable, right? When I switch to line items, I cannot update the total. I have to update based on these numbers here: cost, margin, percentage, price, and quantity. But always, if you change your mind, you can switch back. Go ahead and save and close that. We have, I do want to talk about the permissions. That's a lot of data and information for somebody to be able to edit here. So you might want only certain people in your organization or certain types of team members to have access to that, you're going to want to go to the hamburger menu and manage team. And then from this page, there is a permission profile section. I have three: basic, manager, and marketing. Um, if I edit manager, for example, I'm going to take a look at my billing access. So, can a person with this access permission profile see cost and margin, edit cost, edit margin and price? You would want them to be able to um, do that to edit those numbers. Okay, if they cannot edit the cost or margin, then they can still use this feature. They just could not, they will not see those values. Editing cost alone lets a user modify the cost field. It will be grayed out on the invoice if it's not granted. So you can see it, but it's grayed out. You just couldn't edit it. And then edit margin and price lets the user adjust the margin or price. It will be grayed out on the invoice if not granted. One edge case worth knowing is if a user doesn't have see cost and margin, but does have edit margin and price, they can still see and edit the price, just not the cost or margin. Just think carefully about who on your team actually needs margin visibility. For most businesses, that's owner level information, and it's completely up to you. Okay, when you send an invoice, so we'll go back to our main street. When you send an invoice or market is sent for the first time, ProLine automatically creates cost line items in the budget tab for tracking purposes. I'm going to mark this one as sent. I'm just going to send it. It's going to go to you, Diana. The key behavior here, cost line items are only created for the first time an invoice is sent. If you reset the invoice, make edits, and send it again, they are not going to recalculate. This is intentional. It protects any manual adjustments you may have made in the budget tab. So I'm going to take a look at my budget tab here. Let's say I had gone in and I had made some manual adjustments. I don't want to reset everything I did before because I made an update on the invoice. It's just worth noting you may want to check your budget tab if you are making adjustments to the invoices after sending. We're going to show you a warning, reminding you of this, but that's your cue to check whether any manual budget adjustments are needed. Invoice line items are not going to affect your contract value. That figure only reflects signed quotes. That's normal. If you add line items directly to an invoice, your actual revenue may exceed the contract value, which affects gross profit calculations. Just something to keep in mind when reviewing the project profitability. And then a few other things to take with you. Set default margins before you start on your line items. A little setup in your price list goes a long way when you're building invoices quickly. Use standard groups for quote-based billing. Only switch to line items when you need item level control. Use the description field. A quick note about what a group is gives your team and your customer useful context. Set permissions before rolling this out. So you're just deciding, like we talked about, who needs to see cost and margin and configure it accordingly. Always preview before sending. Confirm everything looks correct and professional before the invoice goes out. All right. Love it. Hopefully that means we did a good job. That's a wrap for today. Invoice line items give you precise control over how you bill, especially useful for change orders, custom work, and itemized invoices. Give it a try. Let us know what you think, and always reach out to support if you need more help. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.